couldn't make it. So hello everybody. Thank you for joining us on our third webinar in the Missouri and Illinois Volunteer Outreach webinars. We're going over the Pollinator Habitat Program today. I'm Katie Kozlich. I'm the Illinois Outreach Coordinator. And I've been putting these on together with Kim. I'll let her introduce herself real quick.
Sure, I'm Kim Cole. I'm the Missouri Outreach Coordinator, so I'm Katie's counterpart over here on the Missouri side.
And thankfully, we've got Drew Larsen. He is the creator and the mastermind behind this whole program. He's going to be going over the program and different how the grant works and all of that. So Drew, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take us away.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. I guess I'll introduce myself, and I'd love to, if you guys are willing, to provide an introduction as well. I'd kind of like to know who I'm talking to here. It's a nice, small, intimate setting, so I think it would be good to get introductions all around. My name is Drew Larsen. I'm the Director of Education and Outreach with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. My main job in the organization is to kind of help develop habitat outreach education programs, one of which we're going to be talking about tonight, our Pollinator Habitat Outreach Program. I work with a lot of other programs, but this is one that's pretty special to me because certainly one I started or helped start about 7 years ago when I came over to the Education and Outreach Department. So I'm a little biased, but it's certainly it's a great program and designed to be implemented at the local level and chapter level. So I'm excited and happy to be talking to you folks about it here today. And then I'll also just say thank you for being a chapter volunteer. We can, as employees, we can design the greatest and best programs out there. At least we feel that are great programs, but at the end of the day, it takes dedicated chapter leaders like yourselves to deliver these programs at the local level. So you guys are the backbone and heart and soul of this organization, and I can't thank you enough for being a volunteer. So thank you. So Lisa, would you mind introducing yourself? Just telling me who you are, where you're from, what chapter you're with, if you don't mind.
Sure. Hi, I'm Lisa McBrier, and I actually work as a Habitat Partnership Specialist for Quail Forever in Missouri. Go Missouri. And I'm also a member of the Mid-Mo Uplanders Quail Forever chapter in Columbia, Missouri. And we just recently did a pollinator habitat for a youth pollinator habitat for children, and it was a lot of fun, and we've done several of those, and I've been to a couple of them, so I'm really anxious to see about the pollinator habitat outreach that you guys are going to be discussing. I think it'll come in really handy and help our group with that already successful event, but just help us grow it some.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for joining tonight. Tasha, would you be willing to provide a quick introduction? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, did I do it?
You got it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Tasha Williams. I am part of the Blackwater Bob White chapter. We just started a couple months ago. I'm the secretary and outreach chair. My daytime job, I work for NRCS, so I'm the sole conservationist for them. So I'm trying to figure out where I fit in and kind of push this chapter to focus and decide where we want to put our energy into. So
perfect. Thank you, and thanks for joining. Katie, Kim, am I missing anybody? That's all I can see on my screen.
Yes, there should be maybe a little arrow to take you down.
Sorry, I was on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I need to learn. There we go.
Next that I see is Colleen.
All right.
Guys, my name is Colleen Martin. I'm part of the Tallgrass chapter up a south suburb of Chicago. I am a horticulture teacher, and so being a board member with pheasants, I've just kind of brought into pheasants with my family, with my dad, but this is something that we've been trying to do with our chapter and more help so we can be successful.
And then you have one more individual, Clay Denny, I believe is another one. So
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Yeah. My name's Clay Denny. I am with the Heartland chapter in Kansas City, Missouri. Youth outreach coordinator, and recently forced into the treasury position. And I do a lot of work with other chapters in the area. I went out to the one out there in Warrensburg just the other month. Blackwater, isn't that what you guys called? Black River, Blackwater, something like that. I was there for that initial meeting. And I've helped out with some other chapters with setting up their first youth outreach programs and just trying to learn more about the habitat side of things. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks for joining, Clay. And then
Yeah, no problem.
looks like we got a Courtney.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. This is like the first time I've gotten one of these to work.
Just barely. Speak loudly.
I'm Courtney Nix, and I am a farm bill biologist in Moberly, Missouri, and I work with 3 chapters pretty regularly, and I'm just here to see how I can help them integrate some of these programs and what they're doing.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining, everybody. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. So again, this is kind of a small, intimate group, which I think is actually nice because in this case, I don't mind if you want to interrupt me. If you have a question, you want to interrupt me and ask the question, feel free to do so. Just take yourself off mute and ask the question, or there is a question and answer feature, I think at the bottom of your screen, where you can just type in your question. Or if you just want to write down your question and save it for the end, I'll certainly leave time at the end to answer questions at that time. But I think it can be fairly laid back here and with a small group, which is nice. All right, well, let's go ahead and get rolling here. So we're here to talk about the Pollinator Habitat Outreach Program. So a couple of things we're going to be covering in the presentation tonight is we're going to go over what the Pollinator Habitat Outreach Program is. We're going to cover some of the minimum criteria you need to be able to agree to as a chapter to apply for grant funding. We'll quickly talk about the grant application process. We'll go over what it takes to actually plan a pollinator habitat outreach event and actually what it takes to conduct one. So we'll kind of go through in detail what it takes to plan and conduct an event. And then finally, we'll wrap up with the fun part of the evening, which is about reporting. So the important part, but fun part. All right, so what is the Pollinator Habitat Outreach Program? So I can't remember who it was already who brought up the Youth Pollinator Program. So essentially, that's what this program is. We have just rebranded it. So if you're a chapter who's been doing a Youth Pollinator Habitat Program project in the past, and I know I heard some familiar names of grant applications that have come across my desk from chapters who have on this call, and I appreciate that. Really, it's the same program. We made a couple small adjustments to hopefully make it easier for you, but really we've just rebranded the Youth Pollinator Program and rebranded it as the Pollinator Habitat Outreach Program. And I'll talk about why that is here a little further in the presentation. So what the program is really it's a program that provides tools and training for our Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever chapters and employees across the country to go out and engage schools, community groups, landowners, and actually engage them in the process of planting a project and provide some education as well along with the program. When grant funding is available, and we do have grant funding available, we can offer grants to our chapters and staff of up to $500 to help pay for some of the project expenses. So really, grant covers half of all project expenditures up to $500 per project. And we'll go into a little bit more detail about that as well. But in a nutshell, that's what the Pollinator Habitat Outreach Program is. Now, we've got some really great partners who help make these grants available to our chapters. And it changes year by year based on who we reach out to and some of the grants that are available. So going into fiscal year 21 here, which is the fall of 20 and spring of 21, Our partners this year include the Monarch Joint Venture, Pollinator Partnership, Corteva Agriscience, Bayer, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So these are the folks who help us provide the grant funding to our chapters and our staff to go out and conduct these events. So I mentioned these folks because they're important folks to mention, but I also mention them when you guys do apply for a grant and you're lucky enough to get one, that you be sure to mention these folks in all your outreach materials, whether that's your signage or your press releases or your post-project press releases. It's really important to mention these folks because some of them, like Bayer and Corteva, have been really long-time sponsors of this program. It's been going on since really 2013, and they're the ones who have been stepping up year after year to help provide this money to our chapter. So in order to keep them happy, we want to be able to mention them in all of our promotional material that we put together around these projects. So those are our fine folks helping support this program and have been for quite some time. All right, now as a chapter, there are a couple criteria or requirements you have to agree to before you apply for grant funding. So I'm just going to quickly cover those requirements, and they're really pretty simple. So number one, we want you to work with an actual group, whether that's a classroom or a community group or a landowner group. We do want you to work with some type of community group in the actual process of planting and providing the educational materials for this project. So some potential groups include obviously schools and classrooms, or schools. It's probably the most popular one that chapters work with. 4-H groups are another one. FFA, church youth groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, youth camps, community groups, garden clubs. Those are some of the main ones that I've seen chapters work with. You can get as creative as you want here, but we do want you to work with a community group of some kind to help actually plant the project, and also where you're providing some of those educational materials to them as well. By far, schools are the most popular group that chapters work with, and that's great. But don't forget about some of the most meaningful events that I've been involved in have honestly been like garden clubs. Number one, they were adults who had no idea what we did as an organization. And I've seen chapters actually get a few more volunteers sitting around the table after conducting an event with the garden club, after that group came and saw, boy, I didn't realize you guys did all this work with pollinators and habitat. I just thought you were a club that went out and hunted pheasants in the fall. So there's a ton of value with working with adults. So don't think this is just a youth program. And that's really one of the main reasons we changed the name of the program, so we could actually include adults and adult groups into this program. All right. Second requirement to apply for the grant is that we want to make sure we're planting the right type of habitat. All right. So we do have some just real basic specifications on what you plant and the size and those kinds of things. Actually, this is one of the changes we just made along with the name change, is the actual acreage size, or the size of the project. So the minimum requirement used to have to be a ½ acre in size. We've done away with that now and can include projects of any size. So with that being said, we still really encourage chapters to work on projects that try to meet that ½ acre minimum. They're meaningful in terms of quality habitat for pollinators, and also in the right spot, a ½ acre project's also good for pheasants and quail. So with that being said, we started to see a number of applications come through, or requests come through, where it wasn't a ½ acre, but the outreach portion of the project was so good, it wasn't very smart to turn down for that reason, because there's a lot of value in the outreach to these projects as well. So the example of that was actually a project we did at the Kansas State Fair. So honestly, it was a tiny little garden, but there's 30,000 people who walk past this garden during the week of the state fair at the Kansas State Fair. So really crazy for us not to support this project just because it doesn't quite meet that ½ acre requirement, but it has a ton of outreach potential. So that's why we changed it. So we don't want to turn away good projects that have that outreach potential, but we still encourage you to try to work with those larger scale projects that will benefit pheasants and quail in the right locations. So it can be any size, basically. We've changed that. We still want a minimum of 50% of the seed mix to be comprised of wildflowers or forbs. That's a really important piece to pollinator habitat because grasses will outcompete forbs in the long run. So when you make that ratio at least 50%, those forbs persist a little bit longer in that planting. So that's a requirement we want you to meet. We also encourage mixes to include at least 30 to 40 species of grasses and wildflower, which includes grasses and wildflower species. Again, this is pollinator habitat. So the more diverse you can make that mix, the better it is for pollinators and ground nesting birds like pheasants and quail. So it's really easy if you order your mixes right through Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, or you work with the Farm Bill biologist or one of our biologists who would be happy to create a custom mix for you. And then lastly, as far as pollinator specs go, we want you to include at least one species of milkweed to benefit the monarch butterfly. So that's a pretty easy one to meet. Anywhere in the upper Midwest, you can include a lot more than that, but we at least want you to include one. So if you are working with a local seed dealer that you have locally that you know well, that you've worked with in the past, we just want you to adhere to these specs when you're putting those mixes together. If you're not an expert on this, and we don't expect our chapter volunteers to be, we've got so many people on staff within our organization who can develop custom mixes based on your soil type and the location to provide a really great pollinator wildlife mix. So I encourage you to, if you're lucky enough to have a Farm Bill wildlife biologist in your backyard, I'm confident they'd be happy to put together a really cool mix for you. And if not, we've already got mixtures put together that can be planted throughout the Midwest. They're going to meet these specifications. So we can keep it pretty simple for you. All right. Third requirement is that we do want to provide some educational activities along with the planting of the project. So we have actually developed some really turnkey activities that you can find online and just print off and use at your event. So the one you see here is just kind of a real fun plant ID activity you can do with your participants. We've got a basic pollinator-free food activity here that people develop their own sandwiches and pizzas based on the ingredients that we have available. And then after the participants put together their favorite kind of pizza or sandwich or ice cream sundae, we take away all those ingredients that are made possible by pollinators, and they're usually not left with much. And it's pretty, this one is a great one to run even with adults because they're always pleasantly, or I shouldn't say pleasantly, they're always surprised about how many food products out there, ingredients are actually made possible by insect pollination. So you have that one. Again, you can just print off and use at your event. Making pollinator seed balls is always kind of a fun one to do with kids as well. So we have plenty of others. Those are just some common ones we see at events that we run. And again, those are all available on our website, free of cost, with the exception of some materials you might have to go buy locally. Some of them you just print off and you can use right at your event. So we want you to use at least have one education activity at your event to help kind of tell the story of why those people are out there planting that project and why pollinators are important. If you're working with a classroom or a school, we do have curriculum. This is not curriculum that we have developed because there's so much great curriculum already out there that our partners have put together. So Omaha Zoo is one that you see here on the screen, the Pollinator Partnership. Monarch Joint Venture has just put together some really great curriculum on monarchs. So there's a ton of free stuff already out there that we make links to on our website that you can just pass along to the teacher you're working with, and then they can use that curriculum in conjunction with the actual project that you guys are coordinating with them. So great stuff. Again, it's just there to pass it along to the teachers, and they can kind of pick the stuff out of there that they want to use and how long they want to use it within their curriculum. I think this is the last requirement, not quite the last, second to last requirement. We do ask that chapters, once they get the grant, that they pay for everything on the front end. So chapters do have to pay for the entire project on the front end. And then at the end of the project, after all expenses have been paid, you submit all the receipts back to our program coordinator. And she will process those receipts, and then you will be reimbursed for half of project cost up to $500. So I'll throw in a little caveat here to that, is that if you've spent $2,000 on your project, don't just send in $1,000 in receipts, because we want to know the the totality of what it took to get that project on the ground, so we can maybe adjust the amount of grants we're giving out or the amount of dollars per grant that we're giving out. So we can always make adjustments on that. So be sure to include receipts of your all the expenses related to your project. But we do ask that once you receive a grant or receive word that you're going to receive a grant, that you pay for the entire project upfront. And then lastly, we do want the project to be signed. So we have worked with a sign company here out of Nebraska that makes these signs for us, and they can actually customize them. The logos you see on there, those are our national sponsor logos that you see in the picture there. So the sign comes included with those. This is just the basic sign, but you can customize it. So if you've got a local project sponsor, you can put their logo on the sign. Then you can't see it on this sign, but we can actually put a little blurb at the bottom or in the middle that says this project was planted by, and we can put the name of the school on there or the group that you're working with. The customizable signs are just a little over $30 shipped right to your door. But if you got a local sign company, you'll see some signs in here that the Missouri folks have done that are much larger in size than this one. So obviously we're not going to ship signs like that. You're better off working with a local company.
No, I got all this.
So you can certainly do that as well, but we try to make it easy for you. If you want to have a sign for your project, you can order it directly from us and have it sent directly to your door. So as long as you agree to meet those basic requirements, and they're pretty basic, we encourage you to apply for a grant. And we try to keep this as simple as possible. So right now, this is going to change here very, very shortly as we're kind of revamping our website, which I'll show you here at the end. But for right now, we still have paper applications that you just download, fill out, and scan and email in, or you can send them in to our program coordinator as well. Really, it's a 2-page application. So you can see the page 1 there, a little bit of it, just your chapter information, a little bit of it about the project, the youth group you're planning to work with, how many acres, that kind of thing. And then there's a space there for just a project narrative, just to kind of explain what you want to do. You don't have to write, a ton there. Honestly, a paragraph is perfect if you can just kind of summarize who you're going to work with, what you're going to do, maybe what activities you want to run. That's more than enough. And the second page is just the agreement. So a lot of the stuff we just covered as far as the criteria requirements are in this agreement, that you're just going to agree to those things. You sign that, you send both of those in. We send you an email saying, it's a great application, you are approved for a grant, please move forward with your project. And then we hold that money there for your chapter, for your project. So, this year was a really great example where we obviously had a ton of projects lined up for this spring with schools. COVID-19 hit and all those projects got postponed. So chapters were saying, hey, do we still, does that mean we lost our money? And no, it doesn't. We have this money in hand from our sponsors. Once we approve a grant, we put that money aside just for your chapter to complete that project. Now, for 3 years down the road and you haven't completed the project yet, you're probably going to get a call from our program coordinator saying, hey, is this still going to happen? Let us know so we can free up that money for another project somewhere. But we're pretty lenient on that. So that's the application process. We try to keep it as simple as possible. The application process will go online here shortly, very shortly. We're still kind of working those kinks out on that. Basically, you'll just fill out the application online and submit it online, so you don't have to print it off and scan it and all that. So that will be coming shortly. And again, I'll show you where you'll be able to find the application now and where the online application will be placed as well. So that moves us into actually planning and conducting a pollinator habitat outreach project. So you've probably already done this. If you've applied for a grant, you've probably already got your youth group lined up. But that's the first thing you want to do. Probably the hardest thing for most chapters. Most chapters have a location to do a project. They just haven't identified a group to work with yet. So again, I gave you examples, plenty of examples of groups you can work with. You're going to see a lot of projects with kids and photos with kids in this presentation. But again, I encourage you to think outside the box there. It's not just a youth program. But you definitely want to nail down that as soon as you can. The process is nail down the group you're going to work with. And then the second thing you probably want to do, again, you probably will have this done before you send in the grant application, but the location for your project. you got lots of choices here. These are some examples that I've seen chapters where chapters have conducted these kinds of projects. Number one being state wildlife management areas. I love these. This is my top choice by far because they're open to the public. People can see what you're doing with your money. Kids can come back to the site because they are open to the public. And in most cases, in state wildlife management areas, you know, these places have pheasants and quail, and these projects are going to benefit the species that we certainly care about, as well as pollinators. National wildlife refuges is another good one. State parks, city parks, schoolyard habitat projects, and even private property is okay. We've done projects on all of these examples here. So again, you can be as creative as you want. I prefer public property, but you're not limited to that. So you've got lots of options there as far as a location to conduct your project. All right, once you got your group you're gonna work with and location kind of nailed down, you wanna start thinking about the actual date of your planting project, because that will then kind of lay out for you your site prep routine and all those kinds of things. So the majority of the events take place in the spring. I would say, you know, in the springtime. So that would be March, April, May, are the probably three most popular months while school is still in session in that spring semester. Is when the majority of these projects take place. Now, with that being said, more and more chapters are going to a fall or winter, what we call dormant seeding. So if the weather cooperates, that's honestly a better time to plant native forbs. We have much better response in terms of germination by doing a dormant seeding. So really any time after November 15th, you're pretty safe. So going into late November, December, January, February. Obviously weather can be a toss-up during that time of year when you get into January and February, but I've actually been to some really nice events in November and December where the weather just cooperated very nicely. And we got a really great seeding on the ground because of it. So you've got options, is what I guess what I'm saying. But I would say the majority of the events are taking place in that March, April, May timeframe. But you want to kind of work with the group you're working with, either the school or the community group, and figure out a date when you want to actually do the planting event. Get that on the calendar as soon as possible. So once you got a date set, then you can start working on site prep. So in just about every case, we're usually going into some type of already sod forming grass like fescue in the south or brome in the north, cool season grass. I would say 99% of the time we're going into that type of substrate. So if that's the case, you're going to have to use some type of chemical burn down to get rid of that vegetation before you go out and actually plant your project. Because if you don't do that, you're really just wasting your time and money putting the seed in the ground if you don't get control of the existing vegetation that's there. So again, we use a glyphosate type herbicide, Roundup type herbicide to kill the existing vegetation that's there. I encourage you to probably use 2 different applications of this to really get your cool season grasses under control. So the best case scenario is to do your first application in the fall after your first hard freeze and you have a 60-degree day. It's a great time to spray brome or fescue as your first chemical application, burn down application. And then you can come back in the spring and hit it again for some of that stuff that comes back up. And then you can be ready to do your project either right on top of that, or if a smaller type project where you can go in and do a tillage to it, you'd have at least the opportunity to get rid of this existing vegetation. So very, very important. Again, I highly encourage you, if you're not an expert in site prep for establishing native vegetation, that again, we have a slew of people all over the country, farm bill biologists, that would be happy to work with your local chapter to help provide some of the guidance there on what you need to do for site prep, the appropriate site prep for a project like this. But I can tell you in 99% of the cases, you will be applying herbicide to this project at some point in time. For smaller type projects, tillage is okay. Obviously for large scale projects of a ½ acre and more, I don't think tillage is probably the best direction to go. You can honestly make it worse by opening up that seed bed and getting more weeds on your project site. But for smaller projects that can be hand weeded, tillage is fine, especially if you're going to be planting plants. or sites that are small enough where people are going to be able to kind of hand weed some of those things, because you will get good seed soil contact that way. So it's an option for you, but you can actually, if you really get the cool season grasses under control with the herbicide, a couple of herbicide applications, you can just actually plant no-till right on top of that project, and it will do just fine. I'll show you some examples of that here in a minute. So once you kind of get an idea of what you need to do for site prep and you start that process, you want to start ordering actual materials for your event. So the first thing is a seed mix. As I stated before, we can help you with this if you're not an expert. We can order the seed right through our Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever seed program. And we have regional mixes already put together that would meet the requirements for this program. But if you do have a local biologist that you can work with, I encourage you that you work with them and have them develop a custom mix for the project, because it will be a better project for that. So they're again happy to help you do that. If you want to incorporate plants into your project, and I encourage you to do so, we work with Agricole, which is a native plant company out of Wisconsin. Doesn't mean you have to work with them, but they're a huge company that can ship plants direct to your door. They ship plants all over the country, which is super nice. So they're one of the few that do that, and they offer us plants at cost for these projects. So you'll find the order form for that and the phone number if you want to call the order in on our webpage, which I'll show you here at the end. So plants are a great thing. The seeding part's a ton of fun, but you'll find, and I'll show you when we get to some photos here in a little bit later, it literally takes about 5 minutes to plant a half-acre project when you got 40 or 50 kids. So if you want to extend your project or the kids' time out on the project site, or your participants on the project site, add some plants to your project as well, especially around the sign. It's always nice to pack in the plants around your sign, because those are going to be the first things that flower, as opposed to your seed. Your plants from seed would take a little bit longer. So buckets are another one. Obviously, if you're going to be doing a seeding, 1 to 2 gallon buckets that you see here are something you're going to absolutely have to have. You can usually find those in any hardware store. You can see this chapter here in Missouri. I believe this was the chapter in Chillicothe. We did one step above and put stickers on every one of the buckets that looked really good. So when the newspaper photographer came out and took some photos, that looked really good, having the logo all over those photos. We don't have buckets like that through Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, because we know you can buy them a lot cheaper, probably just through your local hardware store. But that you'll need. The other thing you'll see in here is some type of carrier. When you order a half-acre mix, a pollinator mix that's a half-acre in size, you'll be surprised about how small the bag is when you receive it. So those seeds are so tiny that you can barely see them. So you have to cut the mix with something so the kids kind of have something to grab onto. So a couple things that you can do is, a lot of things that works really, really well are sawdust that you see here actually works really, really well. Animal bedding works okay. You can use that too. And sometimes if you have a local native seed company you're working with, they can actually provide you zero germ grass seed that works really, really well too. Usually it's native grass seed that they use in the cleaning process that they can provide you that won't germinate, but actually has some type of substance to it to help cut that a little bit and get something for the kids to grab onto. So you will need that too. That's super important as you're planning your project, that you will need something as a carrier along with your seed mix to help kind of spread out that seed. If you're going to use plants, you'll also need just some real common garden trowels that you see here in the photo for the participants to be able to kind of dig those holes and get those plants in the ground. This is where it works nice. Even if you don't want to till your whole project, if you're going to have spots where you're just going to have people plant plants, to have that tilled up, or maybe go drill the holes with a drill, because one thing we have learned is ground that's not tilled, for going into a no-till situation, it's been pretty tough for the participants to actually dig a hole with a garden trowel. So something to think about when you get to that point. All right, a couple of other things to think about purchasing for your event. You don't have to, but I think it makes a better event when you do. So you'll see A lot of the photos, the chapters have purchased t-shirts for their participants. If you have the ability to do that as a chapter, I think that always looks nice for photographs. And the cool thing is, at least my community, when I was coordinating our local youth pollinator project, go pick my daughter up from school, and I'd see about 3 or 4 kids wearing their Pheasants Forever shirt to school, so which is super cool. One of the requests that we have received over the years is kind of a specific shirt for this program. So we've I finally got that done here. So you can see a photo of that shirt here in the upper right corner of your slideshow. So it just says Pollinator Project on the front of the shirt, a nice pollinator photo there. And then the back, it has our national sponsor logos and Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever logos. But there's plenty of room on the back for you to then order, if you order these shirts through Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, you can take them to a local print shop and have local sponsors put on the back as well if you choose to do that. And they're the same cost as our general Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever orange shirts. And we're looking to get some different colors too. Right now we have orange, and I think we do have a tan shirt available, but something that's been a request for quite some time, we finally have made available to our chapters. Take Habitat home brochures, again, another photo of it there, but this is something that if you don't want to spend the money on a t-shirt that's about around $10 a shirt, this is another great option where you can give something where the kids can take home and actually plant their own little small pollinator garden in their backyards. So it's just a tri-fold brochure that talks about our work in the pollinator space. It also includes a seed packet for them to plant about a 10 by 10 space at home, pollinator project at home. So you can order those brochures in a pack of 50 for $100. Hand them to all your participants. A lot of chapters also include a ringneck whistler membership for all the participants. I think that's great because then you have all those kids on your mailing list. So if you're doing other outreach events as a chapter that you would like to invite those folks to, you now are able to do that because they are in the system. So definitely encourage you to do that as a chapter. Canopies, if you're doing your project outside on a hot day, keeping people in shade is super important. So I encourage you to do that if you're having your education stations outside. You're going to have people standing for a long period of time. Tables to conduct your outreach activities on, all your supplies associated for your outreach activities. Porta potty, if you're in a location that doesn't have one, don't forget about that. Water, food, snacks, sunscreen, bug spray, all those things are super important to probably include, and first aid kit to include when you're doing an event. So those are just some common things that I see that chapters have to purchase for these kinds of events. So after you get everything purchased for your event, it's time to take advantage of the free insurance we offer. So if you're familiar as a chapter, filling out the insurance forms for your firearm events, very, very similar. It's actually the same form, it just doesn't include the words firearms in it. So you just have to include the names of all your participants. So because really this is a volunteer event, so that includes your youth participants if you're working with the classroom and your adult volunteers. So include the names of everybody, and you send that in to Pheasants Forever, fax it in, email it in to the address at the bottom 1 day prior to your event, and then you are covered with $1 million of insurance liability coverage. So definitely encourage you to do that. These are very safe events, but you never know. So take advantage of the free insurance that we offer, and it's pretty simple to do. And then we also have a waiver form that we encourage you to use as well. That just, again, if that for some reason they were to get hurt, it's a waiver that they won't come back on you as a chapter, even though you are covered with insurance. Then also on the waiver form, we have included the waiver for photography. So we can use these photographs on social media and other things like that. So be sure you check that before you start taking a bunch of photos and posting those in case somebody doesn't want their photo on social media. We've included it right in the waiver form. It used to be a separate form, and now it's all included in the waiver form. And then don't forget to reach out to your local media. We don't do it for this reason, and chapters haven't done it for this reason, but man, we've gotten some really great positive publicity from these events. But a lot of the time, your local news station doesn't know these events are going on. You usually have to kind of give them a heads up. So don't forget to reach out a week or so before your event and say, hey, we're having this event. If you want to come out and cover it, we'd love to have you. And man, there's some chapters. There's been some really great news stories and some big ones, even like in Minneapolis, the main news station there. I mean, they came out and did a video promo of it, and it was a really great promo for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. So definitely encourage you to reach out to your local media because they will come cover it. It's it's a national deal in terms of the pollinator crisis, so it fits right into the news cycle there. So definitely encourage you to do that. The next thing you want to kind of work on is figuring out what education activities you want to run the day of your event. So again, I mentioned that we put some together for you. They're turnkey that you just print right off our website. It includes all of our pollinator free food games, our plant ID contests, instructions on how to make native bee tunnel nests. Or just to name a few, we've got others on there as well. And I also encourage you as a chapter 2, this is where you can bring in partners to help run some of these education stations. So beekeepers are a great one. And most of them are really interested in helping out with these kinds of events. And a lot of those folks have observation hives they can bring to show people honeybees and bring their beekeeping equipment and talk about the importance of honeybees on our food supply. And honeybees need great pollinator habitat too. So there's all kinds of opportunities to bring in partners to help run some of your education stations. Don't feel as a chapter that you have to do this all on your own. We've tried to make it as easy and turnkey as possible, but if you're not comfortable with it, find a partner. They're out there if you just kind of reach out and look for them. And then the last thing you probably do before your event is to actually put together the agenda. So these can be as simple as 2-hour events. And really that's kind of what we've designed them for to some degree, especially working with school groups if it's part of a field trip or something like that. So you could do this in the morning or afternoon. This is an afternoon example, but this is a typical event right here where, school bus shows up at 1 o'clock, you do a welcome and introductions and thank some folks. At that point in time, if you've got a group of 30 participants, you break them. If you have 3 education stations, you break them into 3 separate groups of 10, and then they each go to an education station and you rotate them after 15, 20 minutes. I wouldn't go any longer than 20 minutes for your stations. And then you can bring them all back together to do the broadcast seating, which again, 20 minutes is probably a little bit long for that. I would say usually it takes a lot less than that, depending on the size of your project. And then you want to definitely leave some time to plant plugs if you've included plants into your project, and then bring them all together for a group photo at the end. And that is 2 hours. They're at about 2-hour events. So you can easily do it as a 2-hour event. If you want to make it longer than that, you certainly can. But this can be as easy as a 2-hour event, which makes it super easy on your volunteers that you may be having help you the day of the event. So that's a pretty typical agenda. Again, you are welcome to make it much more extravagant, add stations, add it longer. But I think this is probably the bare minimum right here. All right, so that's the planning portion of the event. So again, there's really not a ton of planning that really goes into these. Someone who's done both Learn to Hunt events and Pollinator Habitat outreach projects, I feel these are easier to coordinate and plan as opposed to a Learn to Hunt event. I really do. And again, it's a shorter span of time. 2-hour event can still be really, really meaningful. And I have an easier time getting volunteers to come for 2 hours as opposed to all day or a 2-day Learn to Hunt event as well. All right, so we're actually to the day of the event. So I'm going to just walk you through a typical pollinator habitat outreach project here. So school bus shows up, whips a couple of cookies in the parking lot right there that you can see. Kids get out, we break them up into small groups. This was a project in Missouri here, worked out really well at a state park where they actually had some really nice picnic areas that had some shelter. We actually conducted the activity stations. Worked out really well again with this. If you don't have that, that's where canopies and tables come into play. The nice thing is the state park already had that stuff for us, so it worked out really, really well. Ran the kiddos through all the education stations, brought them all back together, lined them up shoulder to shoulder, and had them plant pollinator habitat, actually plant the seed on the pollinator habitat project. See some different photos there. You do your best to try to keep them in a straight line, but 3rd graders can be a little difficult at times, as you can see in the photo, but you do your best. Again, after you plant the seed, hand broadcast a seed. If you do incorporate plants into your project, you do that at the end. And actually, what's nice about that is when you get 30 to 40 participants at your project after you've hand broadcast seeded it, you take them back out and have them take their plants across the project, and they're stomping it down, and it works as actual cultipacking, which is really great in terms of something you want to do after you do a broadcast seeding. So it's kind of like it's a really easy way to cultipack the project after it's done. But again, you can distribute the plants and garden trowels if you have them. And this is the younger kids you have. If you're working for really young kids, they do need some help with this to really get the plants planted right and correctly. Older kids have no problem with that. Adults have no problem with it. To just like planting garden plants at home. So, but younger kids, that 3rd and 4th grade, they do need some supervision and some help when it comes to digging the hole and make sure they're getting their plants all the way in the ground. And again, line them up for the group photo next to your sign so you can send it to your sponsors when you're all done, thanking them for their support. A great photo. That's why it's nice to have the shirts. I think it looks super good and super professional. And that's it. That's a 2-hour project right there, all wrapped up and done. So again, 2-hour project can be super meaningful. We've actually had projects that, span the whole day and are super involved, but they can be as easy as what we're showing you here. Now to the fun part of the presentation, which is reporting. So I know nobody likes reporting, but it is important. Obviously, you guys don't get your grant until you send us the receipts and your reports. So it's the carrot for you to do so. And that stuff is really, really important on our end when we report back to our sponsors what we did with their money and how we match their money. So again, keep all your receipts and invoices. I don't care what the expense was. A lot of chapters ask, are there certain expenses that are eligible and certain expenses that aren't? And that's not the case. If it was tied to the project, it's reimbursable. So, but it has to be an actual expense where you paid money out on. So it does have to be that. That's really the only requirement for that. So again, keep all your invoices and receipts so we kind of know what they are and we can tally them up at the end. And again, so that's one piece of the reporting process. Volunteer hours log is another one. So this is super important. So this includes all the adult volunteers, and actually, if you're working with a classroom, they're considered volunteers on an event like this. If you can get their names, great. If you can't, that's fine too. But the adult volunteers that are there, we certainly want that, and how many hours they were there on the project. You don't have to tally it. We can do that for you, but just make sure we get some names and what they did and how many hours they were there. That's actually a really important number for us to kind of start tracking. And then a no child left indoor report form that you see here. So you're probably pretty familiar with that if you're a chapter who's been around a while and reported your outreach events. So this is just basic chapter information, how many people that were there, what the event was. So I think you're probably pretty familiar with that form. And then the last piece of the reporting process, this one's not mandatory, but we really like to have them. So like I said before, we've gotten a ton of really great positive publicity, either in the newspaper or TV news story. But if you get the project in the paper, please share that with us. We like to keep them and save them and show them to people, especially if it mentions our national program sponsors. So I know this one's difficult because you don't necessarily control what the newspaper reporter writes, but if you do get the opportunity to talk to the reporter at your event, be sure to mention the folks that help fund it, and don't forget about the national sponsors who are making the grants available, because they're important. And when I can send this to a national sponsor, that's what helps me get the money the next year for sure. So be sure to include that when you're talking to your reporter. I know you can't always control that, but if you can, that would be great. And that's it for the reporting. So you compile all that, don't piecemeal it and send it in, but compile all that reporting material, send it to our program coordinator. She'll go through all your receipts and invoices, and she'll process that, and then you'll be reimbursed half of all project expenses, up to $500 per project, and that will go right back into your chapter CMS account after it's processed. So pretty simple. All right, not mandatory or part as a requirement to the program, but there are some really cool post-establishment activities you can do on the project side after it's established. So one of those, the most popular, is tagging monarch butterflies that you do in the fall. So a lot of groups are actually gearing up for that right now, as monarchs are starting to make their way south. So you work with the Monarch Watch out of the University of Kansas. You can go online, order some tags. I'll send them right to you. And you can actually bring the students or the group that you work with, actually the planting portion of it in the spring, bring them back in the fall, September, October, and have them tag monarchs on the site they just planted and see how meaningful the project actually was. So again, not mandatory as part of the program, but one we absolutely encourage you can do on these sites after they're established. And that's just one example. There are many, many citizen science, really cool citizen science programs that you can do on pollinator projects. And you can find a ton of those on our partner, the Xerces Society's website, which again is xerces.org. Don't feel like you got to write it down. We have that actually as a link on our webpage. I'll show you here in a minute. All right, so I'm going to take you quick before I go on. This is a project in Missouri. I'm drawing a blank on where Shelby, maybe I can't remember what town it was in. It was one of our first projects. But Casey Berthold did a time lapse of it. So one of the questions we got early on is, like, can you really have a bunch of third graders plant a meaningful project? Does it really work? And it's a pretty legit question. I even questioned it myself. So hopefully this cool time lapse that they put together will kind of tell the story that yes, third graders can plant a project and plant it very efficiently. Shelby, Missouri. I can't remember the name. So you can see there, that is, they don't work out that well first growing season, but sometimes they do. And what you see there is plain Coreopsis did really, really well that first growing season. So that was like right after they planted it in the dormant season. I think it was sometime in November. I can't remember what the date was on the slide, but this is June. You see that project looks pretty darn awesome. So all hand planted by a bunch of third graders. So you can have a successful project by hand broadcast seeding with a bunch of third graders. All right, that kind of does it for the actual presentation tonight on our Pollinator Habitat Outreach Program. You can find all the information you need for this program on our websites at either pheasantsforever.org or quailforever.org. The program manager for this program is Anna Swerzik. She couldn't be here tonight to give this presentation, so I was kind of filling in for her. But she's really the one who runs this program from top to bottom and who you would work with once you start planning your project and sending in your grant application, and who will actually process your grant receipts as well. So you can certainly contact me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have, but Anna really is the program manager for this, and she's more knowledgeable than I am. So encourage you to reach out to Anna. Again, her contact info is on the website. And before I show you the website, I'll just quickly run through this video. So this was a project in Illinois that Katie helped coordinate and spearhead. And we actually had our film crew from Pheasants Forever come down and film the event. And they produced a really great video just kind of highlighting what a youth pollinator habitat program or pollinator habitat outreach project looks like. So I know a lot of chapters use this video when they're working with their either groups they want to work with or schools to kind of just, hey, this is what I'm trying to articulate it, but I'm not doing a very good job. I'm going to send you this 1-minute video. This will show you what the actual project looks like the day of the event. So I'll go ahead and hit play here and hope it works. So again, that's a great video that you can share with folks who may not quite understand what the program is or the project is. With that, I would take any questions.
Well, we got a few. So we had a few come up through chat. Lisa was wondering, what would you recommend for educational tables if working with adults?
Believe it or not, those programs that the activities that we've put together, they may seem a little childish, but I've run them with adults numerous times. You might have to adjust the way you do it a little bit, but those pollinator free food games actually work really well with adults, and even the plant ID, where you can kind of take away some of the keys and things like that to make it a little bit harder for adults. You can still do that. The other thing I would mention that I mentioned in the presentation is, to me, that's a really, for your education stations, it's a really great opportunity to reach out to partners and engage them. So like I said, beekeepers, if you have a nature center in your community, those folks that, are trained to do that and provide some education and might have a cool activity that they can bring and run. Other teachers, those kinds of things. Our staff, if we have one, that works directly with your chapter that can potentially be there to help run a station. So you have some options, but believe it or not, those ones that we have available on our website can be run with adults, and we're trying to add some new ones for that reason as well. So actually, I was on a call today where we're going to be developing a new one that sounds pretty cool that would easily be run with adults. Great question.
And then Colleen was wondering how many participants to broadcast per half acre.
You can do it. So what we do, with a half acre, depending on how it's laid out, you can do it with 5 or 10 kids. So basically you just have to break it down in strips. So if you've got 5 kids, what I typically do is line them up almost shoulder to shoulder and have them walk a straight line. If your project's nice and square or a rectangle, you just have them walk a straight line down. And then what you do beforehand is divide up your seed into different, however many passes you think it may take, just so they don't use all the seed in the first pass. But then you just kind of divide them out, have them walk a straight line, move them over, where they didn't plant before, right next to that, and have them walk back, and then just kind of continually to piece out that project. But I would say in most cases, 30 to 40 students or participants can pretty much line up, and depending on how your project site's laid out. But in most cases, I can line up 30 to 40 participants along the entire field edge and have them make one single pass. That's the best case scenario, but again, if you don't have enough people to do it, what I try to do is break it up to where they can, do it in multiple passes and make sure you break up the seed so they don't plant it all in the first pass. Does that answer your question?
It does, thanks.
That's another very good one.
All right, and then what kind of management does Quail Forever recommend?
Good one. Before I forget, Katie, I want to go back to that last question.
Okay.
Because one of the other things we're having chapters do, or encouraging chapters to do for these projects, because especially the larger ones that are half acre, 1 acre, 2 acre, pollinator seed mixes aren't cheap. So what we've kind of encouraged chapters to do is actually plant the project with a no-till grass drill, which is probably your most successful technique to really get a successful planting on the ground. So you plant the 2 acres in that, work with your seed company, or you can work with us, and we'll provide you a bag of cheaper annuals that the kids can hand broadcast seed, which do better on top of the soil anyway, as opposed to being put in the ground. So that's an option for you too, if you're kind of worried about the planting portion of it, or if you have a larger project, you just can't figure out how to get kids to cover it, really well. I encourage you to plant the project beforehand with a no-till drill, have the kids come out directly after that, and then have them hand broadcast some annual seeds on top of what they planted, or just have them plant the plants portion of it. Sorry, I should have mentioned that in the presentation, because we have more and more chapters are going that route.
Drew, I just want to mention that allows for you to alter into like better temperatures too for your students or whatever. You can have a little better day or plan at a better time of year, and you're not so adhered to that February really chilly time of year.
Great point. Great point.
All right, so going back to then what kind of management does Crow Farm?
Management. So, you know, on the smaller type projects, you know, depending on where they're located, you know, probably spot spraying or hand weeding is probably your best option on the really small type projects where you can actually get in there and do that and it's efficient. Larger projects that are maybe more rural, I think prescribed fire is the best management tool that you have to help manage pollinator habitat projects. You know, if you have the ability, grazing is another good one, especially if you start getting grass encroachment on your sites. Again, these are for larger sites, but even smaller sites can be burned if you're in a location where they allow you to do that. I think prescribed fire is the best tool you have to managing pollinator plots. Feel free to jump in, Courtney. You know, here if you got other suggestions on management.
The only thought I have along those lines is if you have an area that you're going to have a lot of grass encroachment, you can always plant forb only plots, and then you can come back in and manage with a grass selective. So it'll really help you in long-term management if you do have that fescue or brome or whatever encroachment, you can manage for it a little easier without hurting the grass you actually planted.
Great point.
Yeah, I wanted to ask something about the fires there. Are you guys big on promoting those prescribed fires as events? Because I would think that'd be something that would be very marketable to adults. I mean, it's kind of a cool thing to see.
Kim, you want to take that one?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say we've been doing them as events. We do prescribed fire trainings with landowners because it is such a great management tool, one that's been really lost on the landscape. So, you know, Courtney's probably been involved in these, and I know Missouri has some landowner prescribed burn associations, and Nebraska does too, where our staff actually goes and trains landowners so they can conduct the prescribed burns on their own property. We definitely do trainings, events. You know, we get in some trouble there with liability and things like that with prescribed fire. So events are a little bit different story, but we actually we had an FFA group that was involved. I think Andrew White was involved in it, but you know, Andrew actually worked with that FFA group when they did the burn on the property a couple of years later. You know, a little older high school kids. I know he had to jump through some hoops with insurance and liability and things, but he was able to do that. So there is that option, I think, for older kids, definitely adults for training for sure.
Right. I mean, if we can host a learn to hunt, I mean, we should be able to burn some grass.
It's a great tool for sure. So I would encourage you to work with your farm bill biologist in your area, and a lot of those folks are already doing those kinds of trainings for landowners.
Right.
Hey, Clay,
I was just curious. Yes.
I don't want to misspeak or anything, and Courtney, stop me if I say something stupid, okay? But you should. I'm gonna put your email, your Wonelli, because I know that, on the Missouri Prescribed Fire Association's mailing list. I have an email list for them, and whenever they have just anything informational on fire, we try to put it up on that calendar. And then I know, and also on Missouri too, you know, when we've tried to do anything that involves a burn demonstration. I know Ryan, you know, you came and helped Midmo Uplanders at their learn to pheasant hunt in December.
Right.
And probably about a month after that, Ryan, our president at the time, RPLS here in Boone County, he actually did a burn demonstration for our chapter that we could actually go as chapter members. So I know that you know that are around, and Courtney probably can speak a lot better to that, but I'll definitely put you on that mailing list so that you'll be aware if anything is coming around on the turnpike for something like that.
Great. Well, that'd be good to know about.
All right.
Anything for the Chicago area too for burn?
You're choosing the wrong state to ask that question about, honey. So
Is
it is on the Illinois staff's radar to start working on that. But we're not going to make, we have some feelers out for that and some partnerships that are being explored. But it's no guarantee in our state, unfortunately. There's a lot more legal it's Illinois. There's a lot more legal loopholes with everything in our state. So we want it. We just don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon in Illinois.
I think that's the biggest part. The biggest issue we've had is preparing our sites.
Yeah.
No one wants to deal with the chemicals, the equipment for tilling. So that's where we're at. I can help out with the education parts, the seeding, but it's getting that area prepared. So that's, and we've been trying to do this for 3 years now.
How big is the site?
I think it can vary. We're going to go to our outreach area where we do our learn to shoot area. So we can do a half acre, I'm sure.
So if chemical is not an option, solarization is another one that I should probably throw on this presentation. So basically what that is you're just throwing clear plastic on the ground on your location for where you want to plant. It gets hard to do on a large site, but if you're doing a smaller site, it is a great way to prepare a site. I mean, it does an awesome job of killing everything underneath of it, and it really heats that soil up where it really kills a lot of that seed in that top half of the soil. So you really get a great seed bed by doing that. You just got to have the time to do it, and depending on the size of your project, that's another option for you.
So how would that work? So like tarps and just tying down?
Clear, you want to try to use clear plastic if you can. Black plastic works, but clear is better because it heats up the soil more. So again, you just lay that out and get it staked out so it's not going to blow off, and you just leave it there for an extended period of time until your vegetation underneath is dead and decomposed, and you'll have a black soil seed bed.
So would you do it in fall to prepare for spring?
You could put it out there. It only works like when the plants are trying to actively grow. So you can do it. Now it might be a little bit too late to do it, but usually it's the kind of that springtime of year when things start growing is when you get that out there and get it put.
Maybe
you can
we did it in spring or a fall.
Yep.
Event.
Yep.
That's been our biggest issue. Get started.
In some areas, and some people don't like to mess with herbicide, so it's that is your other option you have if there's some restrictions on herbicide and tillage is one too on the smaller plots. I have no problem doing tillage on the smaller plots. It does potentially open it up for more weeds, but if it's smaller, you can kind of take advantage of those with spot spraying or hand weeding. So
if we did tarps, maybe we can do the tillage afterwards. Do you have like a resource maybe you can help us like?
Yeah, I can. What I can do is maybe Katie, when you send out the link for this, I'll send you some really great links on videos on solarization and some documents that have been produced on how to do it.
Just to throw an idea out there, there may be a local landscaper that'd be willing to go in and spray that with Roundup for you for a reasonable price. You may just want to get on the phone book and find a landscaper that'll spray a half acre. It's a concept.
Yeah, the Chicago area chapters is always, I'm sure St. Louis areas, it always is fun having the difference of finding that chemical prep there. So,
and that's the thing with kids too. If we said that we just prep these areas around.
Well, luckily, if you prep the areas, it takes at least 2 weeks for it to, by then it's not going to be an issue. But yeah, it's definitely one of the things you get to figure out on this.
It's a great question and one we hear more and more, especially with Roundup and some of the issues around it. But so it's an option. We'll include it in the notes, Katie, for sure. And
yep.
I'll provide some
make sure
for you.
Yep, I'll put that all out because we do send an email to everybody after this with some of the follow-up stuff that we talk about. We did have one more question. How far in advance do you have to submit a project application?
We're really flexible. I'll say this, I don't want you to do it, but we've had chapters actually do projects, and then I find out about it afterwards. I was like, did you apply for a grant? They're like, no. I was like, well, why didn't you? We have money available, and so we've actually worked with some chapters that way. So, I mean, honestly, we're pretty lenient. Right now the cash situation's good in terms of the people who've supported the program. We have money available. That may change when, we get more and more chapters wanting to do projects and we don't have the money available to do all the projects that we have requests for. But the earlier the better, for sure. So, if you're planning projects now for like a dormant seating in November, I would say a month. That in my mind, that's kind of a perfect time frame, but I understand that isn't always perfect. So if it's a little bit later than that, I mean, if it's a week before your event, and you meet all the requirements and we have money, then you're good to go. So you're just again, you're kind of, if you wait, you're maybe potentially gambling if we have money or we don't have money. So earlier the better.
All right, so I think that's all the questions we got in the chat. If anybody has questions right now, you're welcome to unmute yourselves. I think everybody is, besides me and Drew, muted right now. So if you got any questions, feel free to ask them now. All right.
One more quick thing I'll add, Katie, because this question we have certainly been getting, especially since this is an event-based program. Obviously with COVID, that makes things challenging, and certainly was challenging this spring. We actually did have a couple chapters that had events planned for the spring, Pollinator Habitat outreach events planned for the spring, but they did move forward with them and did them virtually. So the chapter planned the project, the no-till drill. They actually worked with the teacher as part of their distance learning curriculum, and they got on a Zoom call just like this with their students, and we actually walked them through our pollinator free food activity. And that's one that, if you feel comfortable with it, you can do it yourself, which we encourage you to do. But if you don't, if one of us is available to do it, we're happy to potentially do that. And we still counted that as a project. The kids unfortunately weren't able to get out on the project site, but we still provided that education component to it and provided pictures of the site. And the chapter also sent each student a t-shirt and a Take Habitat home packet, so they could actually plant a project in their backyard if they chose to do so, and they encourage them to do that. So it's challenging, but we can still do these projects if school is shuttered this fall and next spring.
I just wanted to throw something in on there with that. With our, we had a shotgun shootout event August and July, and we used the whole quarantine deal kind of to our advantage and said, hey, let's get outside and have some fun and shoot some guns and get back outdoors with friends and family, outside with space where it's safe. And I think you can do the same thing with a habitat project. Use it as an opportunity to get outside, put your hands in the ground, and have some fun. And it's fine.
I think you're right. Yeah, because you could set it up in a way where you kept people 6 feet apart on an event like that. I think pretty easy if you really wanted to. It certainly makes it more challenging.
Right.
But
Don't go into it with the pitch of fear. Go into it with, hey, this is a great opportunity to go out and be outside and be around people, but still be safe,
Great point.
That's all I wanted to add.
All right, well, I think that is all the questions we got. Thank you, Drew, so much for coming on and doing this presentation. Thank you for everyone who gave up the time to join us tonight. Me and Kim, traditionally after these, we send out, it's usually the next day or the day after that. We do send out an email with a link to this recording if there's anybody you want to share it with. We'll also include some of the documents like the application forms and links to the resource websites. And I usually will include, and I'm not sure, Kim, if you do this too, I'll include a list for the Illinois people. I've been doing this for a while, so I've got some Illinois specific resources that might work for you, or some groups and suggestions to reach out for this. But we'll send this out probably the next day or two with some follow-up information for you. And we hope to see you on our next webinar, which is, I am completely blanking on the date, Kim.
It's on September 9th. And that one we'll have Colby Kerber on, and he'll be talking about hosting a Learn to Hunt or hosting a mentored hunt event. So that'll kind of round out our training series for the summer.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of the evening.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks.
everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good night.
Thanks for coming on, guys. Good to see you.
Thanks.